In case it all goes bzzz, you'll know why. But hopefully not, as I'm running it with minimal amount of electricity. Hopefully it'll just about cobble its way along. Anyway, let's do some housekeeping questions. Any evidence you can have gas pressure without a container?
Are you asking if it's possible that gas will not fill space?
Yeah. Again, over the last few weeks, people have been saying or suggesting that we should perhaps refine the questions. So I've given it a bit of thought over the odd shower or two, thinking about, well, how could they be refined? And in discussion with Craig, the computer guy, it's highlighting the fact that they're self-contained. They kind of have their own answer within the question, but it's still a valid question to be asking, given that there's a paradigm that defies the question which is self-answering. So there is a lot of refinement that's gone into each of these housekeeping questions, and asking if you can have gas pressure violate the second law of thermodynamics, which is what we are asking in essence, is to affirm that you have a belief in a sky vacuum that violates the second law of thermodynamics, which people do. They believe the sky is a vacuum. Very appropriate that we ask. It may get refined, and if it does, someone will be arguing the toss about how, and it will stick. But for now, is there any evidence that we have a sky vacuum above our head in violation of natural law, aka any evidence we have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
Well,
My son does say that the universe is the container.
That would mean that the gas that Earth is producing would have to fill the whole entirety of the system that they describe in the heliocentric model as the universe. That's absurd. We're a tiny little dot in that system. Now, I'm not suggesting this is the case, but that is their belief, based on a flat Earth measurement of a angle to Polaris to give them a radial value to put us as a sphere shape in a sky vacuum. To say that the entire universe is a container is to suggest that the Earth is the arbiter of filling every single square inch of space, in inverted commas, with gas, so that we can have pressure here. That's absurd.
Well,
right.
I don't know. Point out.
I was going to say, if they say that the universe is the container, then gas would fill that space.
Yeah, it is that simple, isn't it? We'd be dead.
Well,
yeah, so they would. Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry, I forgot you were there.
Right, it's John. I cut him off. Sorry, John.
No, that's Brian.
No, I cut off Brian. So it's Brian's turn. I just want to say then gas would fill space if they claim that the universe was a container.
Their claim of a sky vacuum violates their claim. Their claim violates itself, because a vacuum is only, what is a vacuum? In reality, what is a vacuum? It's an area of low pressure. That's what it is. There's no such thing in reality, only theoretically, there's no such thing in reality as a zero vacuum, which is a perfect vacuum. It doesn't exist in reality. It violates natural law. So what you do, so the only thing that we can garner in reality is a low pressure system, right? And that requires a physical, tangible container. And to get low pressure, you need pressure to begin with. So if you want to make a vacuum, you've got to remove the already existing air pressure, or gradiate the pressure in some way where you will have some form of a vacuum at the top of that gradient. But that requires a physical container. It isn't possible to have a vacuum without a container. They're claiming to have air, gas pressure, temperature, and vacuum without a container. Their whole paradigm is in violation of the first, second, and third law of thermodynamics, not just the second one, because of what they're claiming. So it's not possible to have a low pressure system without having pressure. You can't have that. And to have pressure and the low pressure system and temperature or anything else, you need physical, tangible containment. Now, there is no demonstration that I'm aware of that can prove otherwise.
A quick question for you, Brian, if you wouldn't mind. I understand why things weigh more in a vacuum, Well, I was speaking to someone recently, and they said how a scuba diving tank, an air tank, will weigh more with air in and weigh less without air in. So that kind of implies that gas does have weight. So I was wondering if you could help me out with that.
No. What has been weighed on the scales is the downward force that the gas is imparting on the inside in the container. So if you add, and you have to remember, in a scuba diving tank, there's going to be a high pressure, a high density of gas, a high concentration of gas. So the more gas you place into that container, right, the more the number on the scales will go up. Now, if you take a heater, a hairdryer, and heat that container, the number on the scales will rise even more. If you cool the container, the number on the scales will go down. What are you changing? You're changing the pressure. All that's changing is the pressure. Pressure is in 360 degrees in all directions. One of those directions will be down. And the pressure that the gas is exerting on the base of that container, as well as the fact, the pressure that the gas is exerting on the base of that container will be read on that scales as weight. But you also have a temporary liquefaction that can happen with gases at the base of a container, whereas it's only a temporary thing, where some gases liquefy and then they liquefy and then they phase change back to a gas. But you take the top off of that container, and will that number on the scale stay equal? Right? If there's a higher psi of pressure in that container than there is outside the container, what will happen? The number on the scales will go down, right? Because what will happen to the gas? It'll go up out of the container. It will equalize. If you have a lower pressure in that container than the surrounding psi, when you open the container, the number on the scales will go up. All that's changing is the pressure, not weight. Gas can't have weight, because if it had weight, it can't function as a gas. It can't do what it does.
However,
The difference between the difference.
They have forced it into that convention by what they've asked Central Goat. And my response to that, Central Goat, would be to say, so a container is going to be required for us to have weight be described in this incorrect convention. We describe gas with pressure, but we describe solids through air on a scale, that's a downward vector for solids in air, as weight. Well, you can force air into a container to then put the container on the scale. So my argument and response would be, so we're definitely going to need a container for this then. And if they say, yeah, but I'm saying gas has weight. Well, for your arbitrarily describing the downward vector of any gas particle at a given time, ignoring all of the vectors as weight in containment, then for you to fudge that description for gases in general, we're going to have our atmospheres, oxymoron, sphere-shaped air, for them in a sky vacuum, to be contained, to make this fudged example of weight for gas. Yeah, so we'll have to have a contained system for that, is the answer. Yes, we will. Debunking space.
We wouldn't have this argument with Pollard, would we? This would be an Ethereum thing. Down is relative to a flat plane.
Boom. You want to go over that in a bit more detail, John? You listening, Central? This is the most important. I should have started here. My bad. Go ahead, John.
Down is a vector related to up and down on a vertical vector. Vertical is always with respect to horizontal. They have to claim inwards if they're a baller. Down is only relative to a flat plane.
Oh dear.